Jackson, I guess, is the student center, you know, the big glass thing. So we have more space than we had about a year and a half ago for meetings. But they're heavily using it, and there could be conflict over that resource. There is, when students are trying to get into classes, you know, we put a limit on the enrollment, which is the limit defined usually by the room size, because the fire marshal says we can't have more than that number of people in there. This room seats 120, and I limited this class to about 60, and we have maybe, several people have dropped and just disappeared, so I think we might have about 32 folks enrolled. So we don't have a problem with space. Scarce resources, and we'll see those in much more detail later. Finally, the manifest conflict arises, and we engage in something called conflict reduction. Notice, and if you've heard anything about conflict management anywhere else in your studies, almost always, if not always, the person will say conflict resolution. And I refuse. Because most of the time in organizations, the best we can do is bring it down. We can't remove all of it. So I choose not to use the term conflict resolution. If you hear it, you won't see it anywhere in this book. You will not see it on the exams as conflict resolution. But if you hear it from anyone else, they mean conflict reduction. Then we have two boxes. Oh, and after applying some method of conflict reduction, and we'll look at those in a moment, we possibly leave a conflict aftermath. If we are able to remove the root cause of the conflict, then there will not be any conflict aftermath. Over here, we have perceived conflict. This is the moment the individual, think of yourselves in any conflict episodes you've been involved in, the moment when a person can feel the conflict starting. And it could be because a person is yelling. It also could be something much softer, such as in early stages of student teams, where you are discussing what you're going to do and how you're going to do it. Then we have to add in an emotional part to conflict, and that's called felt conflict. Now this is what you meant. I was reserving my reaction to you until I got to this point, what you meant by battle. There's a lot of emotion in the fight, whereas in disagreements and misunderstandings, it could be two people simply not comprehending something, but not elevating it to a battle or to a shouting match. Oh boy, I think there's something in this room bothering me. So let's take a look at, building up to running the short scene from Fried Green Tomatoes, which is arguably one of my favorite film scenes of all. If you've seen the film, Fried Green Tomatoes, you know that this is Kathy Bates, Jessica Tandy, and some others that are lesser known. Have any of you seen Fried Green Tomatoes? Nobody. Wow. That's really unusual. You've seen it. What scene in that film would capture my attention as an example of a conflict episode? What? The Winn-Dixie parking lot scene. So you remember it. Okay, that's the one. It runs about 3 minutes. But let's have an idea of what can constitute latent conflict, and these are the sources of conflict in an organization. And I said scarce resources. You do that, what I was leading up to, and I just got distracted. We're coming up now on enrolling for summer courses. And as I said, we have a limit on the size of the classes. And if they sell out and you want into that class, that scarce resource can put you into conflict between the faculty person and yourself. You might email the individual and say, I would like to get into your class because if I don't, my mother will kill me and I won't graduate and all that kind of stuff. And the faculty person could respond by saying, stick it in your ear, depending on how rude the person is. Or they could discuss it. So the scarce resource starts a potential episode. Organizational differentiation is a formal term for how an organization gets divided up into groups and functions, like departments. Rules, procedures, and policies. To add a course, we have a University of New Mexico policy, procedure, and rule. To add a course that is closed, you must get the signature of the responsible faculty person. So that drives you toward the individual, and you'd have to interact with that person. Cohesive groups, they develop a culture of their own and can then build up into a situation where they're in conflict with others. High interdependence among people, such as student teams, or better yet, within the university, there's interdependence among departments, and if you need to do something with financial aid, you have to go and interact with certain people. Communication barriers of using words that are not understood by another party or having a strong accent. In the United States, the country is so big, and this is just dealing with native-born people, that there are huge accent differences in different parts of the U.S. Okay. So let's try our hand at this notion of the conflict episode model in figure 11.1 with the scene from Fried Green Tomatoes. And almost always when someone has seen this film, they remember that particular scene. It's a 1991 film. I didn't happen to like the film very much, but when I got to the the Winn-Dixie parking lot, I jumped out of my seat. That was just perfect, as if they read the chapter and then wrote the scene to fit. And it's the only scene like it in the entire film. Everything else is dealing with Evelyn Couch's relationship with her husband, with Jessica Tandy and the other people, and so on. But we have Evelyn Couch, played by Kathy Bates, who is a repressed Southern housewife. I can't remember the state within which this happened, but I'm sensing it was something like Mississippi, but I'm not sure. Do you happen to recall? I don't. She meets elderly Ninny Threadgood, played by Jessica Tandy, at a nursing home, and she is spry. Unfortunately, she's passed away. She's a great actress. She's an Academy Award-winning actress, and she plays a fairly old woman in this film. And as an example of Evelyn Couch's repressed housewife relationship with her husband, he's a jerk. I think that's the nicest thing to say about him, if you can remember the character. Of course, it's all acting and the like. But they've been married for quite a while, and their relationship is a little not so good. So Evelyn goes to a lot of trouble to make a beautiful dinner. Remember, beautiful table, candles, beautifully prepared food. And her husband comes home from work, takes off his coat, goes to the table and serves the food onto his plate and goes into the television room to watch a sports game. That's my memory. And for any of you who are married, you probably would have shoot the guy if he did that to you. So this scene, which runs about 2 minutes, occurs in the Winn-Dixie store parking lot. And Winn-Dixie is a Southern chain like Safeway. And don't need to be concerned. Depending on where the film stopped when I was positioning it before class, it may start with this Iggy Threadgood and the tail end of the Ruth Jameson discussion, so just ignore it. The part that I want you to understand occurs when Evelyn's car enters the parking lot. Now, here's the job. And we can use the discussion question straight up for this. Did Evelyn expect to enter a conflict episode in that parking lot? What was the basis of the latent conflict that triggers the conflict episode that you will see? And then I want us to talk about the manifest conflict that I know occurs in this short scene. And I'm going to let it run for about 30 seconds after the parking lot so you can see her interaction with Ninny Threadgood. Yeah, Ninny. I hadn't seen that part in a long time. But now that's Ninny Threadgood on the right. Okay, go to, we can bring the conflict episode model figure back on screen. All right, very slowly, just gently think about the scene. What was the latent conflict that triggered this conflict episode?
The lack of parking spaces.
Say it again?
The lack of parking spaces.
Yeah, scarce resource. I'm just trying to reach for the formal terms that I've used. She knew the guy in the Cadillac, and he waved to her, and it's warm-ish out there. It's not too bad, but she thought that was her space and that she had been waiting to get it. So a scarce resource. At the beginning of the scene, when she's just driving in with a little bit of music in the background, did Evelyn Couch think that she was going to get into a conflict episode? No. She's just driving in and wants to park so she can do her shopping. And this is how often a conflict episode starts. We don't have a clue that it's coming toward us until it hits us. And in this instance, what was the manifest conflict? Well, they took her spot, and then she said to them, whatever the words were she used, she said, I was waiting for that spot. We can paraphrase. And then they made some rude comments about the old lady wanting the spot, and they were going to just take it. So that moment of the dispute between the two young women and Evelyn, that's manifest conflict. Now, it gets better, does it not? Would you say that, let me back up. At what point would you say Evelyn Couch perceived the conflict? This is mental. Nothing's happened yet, just the sense that the conflict episode has started. Reach out, take a stretch. Remember, she had her hands on the steering wheel and she sort of jumped when she saw the Volkswagen go into the spot. That's the moment at which she perceived the conflict. Now, we're going to do this again with a scene from Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, and I want you to become sensitive to the notion of perceived, which is distinct from felt conflict, though the two can reside in the same episode. Would you say there was any felt conflict in this scene? The emotional part of conflict. Yeah.
The comment that the young lady made?
Well, the comments, but more than that, this is where we're using a cinematic metaphor for the concept of felt conflict. How many times did she smash the Volkswagen?
5 or 6. 3?
You think it was 5 or 6?
I don't know.
It's exactly 4. And each one got better. You know, the first one was practice, because she hadn't quite done something like that before. And then she backs up and she becomes even more motivated to engage in the conflict episode. And then the last one is really good, and you get the close-up shot of the rear of the Volkswagen pretty much crushed down with the lights hanging, the tail lights hanging off, and so on. So in fried green tomatoes, latent conflict is the scarce resource of parking space, the absence.